episode of Extreme Peril.
Everything is shaking. Section after section after section had dropped. People in their cars, afraid to move, crying for help.
All of a sudden, this thing caved in. The appetite for the sinkhole was enormous.
There's just fire everywhere. And all this fire came up underneath of it. He fell into an open cell that was full of hot gas.
I remember thinking, how are they going to get him?
Once he loses the grip, he's lost to the forces of the channel.
I mean, it had to have happened in thousandths of a second. Quick and big. It was huge.
The whole freeway upper deck had collapsed, and it looked like an atomic bomb had gone off.
An individual came up to us and said, hey, there's a guy still alive in a car up here.
On October 17, 1989 at 5:04 p.m., a magnitude 7.1 earthquake severely shakes the San Francisco Bay Area. It's the largest earthquake to strike the city since 1906. At the time, Mark Hoffman is a young lieutenant with the Oakland Fire Department.
I walked outside casually and then realized, wow, everything is shaking. I could look downtown and I was looking at flagpoles and streetlights. Everything was moving around.
What he can't see is the collapse of the Cypress Street Viaduct, a double-decker freeway only a quarter of a mile away.
238, we have a major injury accident.
I didn't realize how severe an earthquake it was going to be.
When Mark and his crew start patrolling their district, at first they find only minor damage. Then, Mark spots a gray cloud several blocks away.
It looked like an atomic bomb had gone off. There was a giant plume of smoke.
When they arrive at the viaduct, the scene is gruesome and shocking.
Section after section after section had dropped. It went that way from where I stopped, as far as I could see, all the way down.
A 3/4 mile long section of the freeway's upper deck is collapsed onto the lower level, crushing dozens of cars and trucks that were traveling on the lower deck. Much of the smoke the fire crew sees is actually the dust of the shattered concrete.
The Cypress Viaduct was designed in the late 1940s and early 1950s and constructed in the mid-1950s. The kinds of things that led to the collapse of the bridge itself were things that were inherent in its original design.
One of the most obvious design deficiencies happens where the columns supporting the upper deck are joined to girders on the lower deck. The quake's violent side-to-side shaking cracks the support columns. As the shaking continues, steel reinforcing bars inside the columns begin to fail. When the columns slip off their foundations, the upper deck quickly collapses onto the cars and trucks traveling below.
People walking around like zombies, bloody, obviously injured. Others are in their cars, afraid to move, crying for help. It was very dramatic.
Firefighters quickly climb up to the lower deck to search for survivors among the 160 persons trapped in their vehicles. Rescuers soon confirm that many of the occupants are dead. But then they reach a small, half-crushed sedan.
The cap, which is a large structural member of the freeway, had dropped and crushed the front of the car, including the whole engine compartment and the front legs and hips of the passenger and driver.
The two women in the front seat die instantly, but in the back seat are two young children. They're alive.
We thought we were home free. When we got the girl out, we thought we could grab the boy and now slide him out. But when we tried to slide him out, we realized that he actually was pinned by his foot.
The impact traps the boy's foot under the passenger seat, which in turn is crushed beneath a massive concrete cap.
Early on, I called for a chainsaw, and my intention was to cut the boy's leg off if he started to code before we got a doctor up there to actually attend to it.
In a different part of the structure, firefighter Andy Papp finds another trapped survivor.
In my whole career, I have not seen an incident like this. That much damage in a mile and a quarter of an area. The car was smashed down to about 24 inches. The driver's side door was slightly open. And when I looked in there, I saw a hand, and I touched it, and he says, "Yeah, I'm here, get me out of here."
The man man is lying sideways across the bench seat of his pickup truck, but his lower legs are buried in a dense mass of crushed steel and dashboard.
I told him that it's going to take a while before we can get you out of here. We had no heavy equipment to rescue him, so we started doing the best we could. We started pulling the stuffing out of his seat, so give him a little bit more room.
Andy and his team let the air out of the pickup's tires and used some 20-ton jacks loaned by a truck driver to open up the cab as much as possible.
About half an hour into the rescue, our officer came up and asked me, Andy, if you can't get this person out of this truck, he says, we're going to have to move on. There's other people who can help. And I told him, I said, we can get him out, but it's going to take a long time.
Andy's only tool is a reciprocating saw. And there's another problem. Andy can't see what he's cutting.
I told him, I said, I'm going to put a saw in here. You put it on the steering column. I'm going to start cutting. Make sure I don't cut anything vital off.
Repeated aftershocks add to the terror, rocking the damaged structure and threatening to bring it down at any moment.
The portion of the viaduct that actually collapsed was constructed over soft bay mud, on top of which had been placed compacted or engineered fill.
The ground underneath the collapsed section of the freeway is an unstable mix of clay, silt, sand, and gravel. It readily transmits shock waves up to the freeway structure, unlike the dense silty sand underneath an adjacent section of the freeway, which is still standing. Andy finally manages to cut through the steering column. The man's left leg is now free.
He thought he was bleeding to death. The only way I could tell if he was bleeding to death is just feel his legs to see if it was wet, but it wasn't.
But the job is only half done. The man's right leg is trapped even more tightly beneath the crushed dashboard. Worse, the upper freeway deck is slowly sinking down on top of them. They've already lost 5 inches of space. If it keeps sinking, both victim and rescuers will be crushed. At 7:30 p.m., pediatric surgeon James Betts from Children's Hospital reaches the crushed car where the young boy is pinned in the back seat.
It was a horrifying scene. His right leg was crushed completely flat from his knee down.
A couple hours into it, became apparent that even if we were able to get the leg out in one piece, they're not going to be able to save the foot, period.
There was no way that anyone was going to be able to lift this 500 tons of structure off of his leg. It had to be amputated in order to save his life.
Firefighters free the boy's left leg. Dr. Betts then immediately amputates the boy's right leg.
We pulled him out. I wrapped up his leg, and he was then taken down the ladder and down to the ground.
The boy is transported to a local hospital where he is stabilized and treated for his injuries. The rescue effort at the crushed pickup truck goes on for hours. Firefighters do their best to push the collapsing structure out of the way, but the driver's leg still isn't budging.
The hardest part is moving the vehicle away from the individual. We have so much torn metal around him that's crushing him down, both from below and above.
Finally, someone hands Andy the one set of tools he's been waiting for, the jaws of life. Andy uses these hydraulically powered spreaders, cutters, and rams to create space around the victim. The tools do what's impossible for Andy to do by hand in this situation. Apply thousands of pounds of force exactly where it will do the most good.
Once we got his other leg out, there was enough room to slide him out. Just kind of almost passed out at that moment. I crawled over to the side with him on my chest and handed him over to a waiting ambulance crew.
The man Andy saves is Tim Peterson, the son of one of Andy's colleagues in the Oakland Fire Department. On the day of the earthquake, Tim is a 24-year-old rookie in the Treasure Island Fire Department.
I was out running an errand for a chief. Every day somebody was given this position called details, and then I was on my way back.
As Tim pulls onto the lower level of the Cypress Viaduct, his pickup truck starts wobbling.
I thought I ran over something. You know, for a second there was that thought. And because I mean, it was being moved around, the whole truck. And then there was just a huge boom. That was it.
With most of the impact hitting the right side of the truck, Tim gets thrown sideways across the seat.
Right away, all you can hear are horns blaring and engines revved. People got crushed in their cars, and the foot goes down on the accelerators. And then a car right behind me had caught on fire, and so it was starting to all fill with smoke in there, and I could hear people screaming. Andy had crawled down in this thing where nobody else was going, and he's not gonna leave me. So he said, I will be back, and I'm gonna get you out of here.
Finally, after 10 o'clock that night, Andy finishes the job. Tim's back, clavicle, scapula, shoulder socket, and ribs are all broken. One rib has punctured a lung. His ankles are shattered. He is the only survivor in that quarter-mile section of the Cypress Viaduct. After Tim fully recovers from his ordeal, he joins the Oakland Fire Department.
Every October 17th, Tim calls me and thanks me for taking him out of the freeway.
I didn't think I was gonna get out of there, and it's because of this guy.
And I always call him certain names, and I says, okay, now you can stop doing this.
And his wife always says, you know, Andy always likes it when you call, or whatever.
What an amazing string of events to be saved by people that were peers and friends of his father, and then his future employers. I guess he's been smiled upon a few times in his life.
All of a sudden, this thing caved in. It was like a funnel.
Huge trees started dropping out of sight.
The appetite for this sinkhole was enormous. There were people that thought it was the end of the world.
November 20th, 1980 at Jefferson Island, Louisiana, 130 miles west of New Orleans. Around 6 a.m., tugboat captain Horace Menard and his son show up for work at the Crystal Diamond Salt Mine on the shore of Lake Peigneur. But before they get started, an oil derrick in the lake catches their eye.
We saw that the rig derrick was leaning to one side. We knew right away that there was some problem going on. It wasn't right.
The derrick, along with tons of drilling equipment, sits in shallow water on a low-rise platform several hundred feet from shore. Dozens of 45-foot pilings sunk 30 feet into the lake bottom give the platform more than enough strength to support the derrick, the equipment, and the drilling crews working there around the clock. But at 7:25 a.m., something goes terribly wrong.
The derrick toppled. The cable broke and the derrick toppled in the water.
At the nearby Rip Van Winkle Botanical Gardens, horticulture director Michael Richard feels a wave of tremors move through his lakeshore office.
We had no idea what was going on. When I looked out and I saw that the drilling rig was gone, it was incredible.
Nervous salt mine officials board Horace Menard's tugboat to get a closer look at the drilling platform. But when they get to the location, it's gone.
There was only about 5 or 6 pilings standing up, and there was a little whirlpool. Not very much, not very big. Still didn't look too dangerous. And all of a sudden, this thing caved in. And this little whirlpool of 1 foot in diameter had turned into about 300 foot in diameter and about 300 foot deep. It was like a funnel, like a big old funnel.
In seconds, several barges loaded with oil well production equipment start to circle the center of the vortex. Horace realizes too late that he's in serious trouble.
So I turned the boat around and we're heading back out into the main canal. The hole got bigger and bigger and bigger, and this suction was at our stern of the boat. And I had the engine wide open, and I could hear my son running around the deck at the bottom and hollering and screaming. He wanted to jump overboard.
What looks like a giant bathtub drain in the lake is pulling the boat down. The more the powerful vortex expands, the harder it is for Horace and his passengers to escape it. There's only one way out of the lake, a canal that flows to the Gulf of Mexico. But the tugboat can't get there because a fully loaded barge is in the way. But then the whirlpool does something completely unexpected.
It burped. And when it burped, you had mud and pilings and barrels shooting up in the air about 100 feet in the air. And when that took place, this loaded barge that had us blocked was straight up and down, going into the hole.
The sudden reverse surge is all Oris needs to get his tug out of the lake and into the safety of the canal, where he and his passengers scramble onto dry land. Now they watch as the vortex devours everything within reach.
It was unbelievable. And as I was standing there watching the hole caving in, suddenly the power poles dropped out of sight. Just like somebody jerked everything out from under them. Huge trees, 75 and 80 feet tall, started dropping out of sight.
The appetite for this sinkhole was enormous. As the water level dropped in the lake, land started sliding in and peeling off in layers like slices of a cake. As the crater grew toward the house that we were standing on, we were advised by the sheriff's department that it was time to go.
Now, an even more bizarre sight. The canal that normally drains water away from the lake is suddenly hundreds of feet above the empty lake bed.
And salt water from the Gulf were flowing into Lake Peigneur. It was the highest waterfall in Louisiana, approximately 600 feet. It was just awe-inspiring to see the forces of nature at work. There were people that thought it was the end of the world.
But in the cavernous salt mine underneath Lake Peigneur, it really is the end of the world after a horrified electrician notices a surge of water advancing across the mine floor. Water breaks through on the mine's 1,300-foot level. As the surge becomes an all-out flood, the water threatens to trap miners working the next level down, 1,500 feet below the lake.
There was no way to stop the water. The only thing we could do is to try to get everybody clear because there was no way we were going to stop it.
He immediately signals to the other 54 workers in the mine that they need to get to the surface as fast as they can.
We moved up the air shaft, and there were a couple of guys already there saying that this was probably just a drill.
When the alarm sounds, LSU professor Robert Toms and 2 students are in the mine working on a government-funded study.
Then a guy came up and said, water's coming in. Said, we're going up to the next mine level. This was now total darkness because the mine lights had gone off.
By 9 a.m., an hour after the evacuation order, everyone is safely off the lake and out of the mine.
The vortex became increasingly powerful as it enlarged in size. The bottom of the lake was really altered drastically by this suction going down the hole. For a while, they had a crater there that was probably a quarter of a mile wide and over 100 feet deep. And the whole lake had gone down in the hole in about 4 hours.
When an estimated 800 million cubic feet of mud and water flow into the mine, the result above ground is explosive.
The compressed air coming out of the mine, this is making a deafening roar that could be heard in New Iberia 10 miles away.
And all of a sudden the water rose to the bottom of the air shaft, and there was this violent shearing effect off the top of the water that caused the spray to go up and out the top like a geyser.
By now, survivors are wondering what caused this disaster. Is the oil drilling operation responsible? Or did the mine collapse on its own? But the facts matter little as the yawning vortex relentlessly destroys all the evidence. In the strange hours that follow, 9 of the 11 barges sucked into the vortex suddenly pop back to the surface. But the damage to the mine operation is hardly limited to what is caught in the lake.
Everything was gone. The only structure left standing was the old office building. This time we knew nothing was going to put it back together. It was done. It was all done.
It was almost like a numbing feeling. Most of us were without jobs. Some died of heart attack. Some divorces happened from this. It was a chain reaction that took place.
Also gone is the lakeside house where Michael watched the incredible events unfold.
The roads coming in were gone. All the utilities were gone. Greenhouses that we had for the commercial nursery were torn in half.
Today, the lake's placid surface hides all but the smallest traces of the violence that changed it forever.
Salt water from the Gulf backfilled the whole lake with saline water. So the whole ecology of the lake was changed. They took some time for the lake to reach an equilibrium and still has a deep dead zone in the crater where the heavier salt water has remained after almost 30 years.
It would have taken just one mistake on somebody's part, and everybody would still be down there.
So many people could have got killed. We could have been all swallowed in this cavity. We'd have been in the salt mine forever.
It looked like just waiting for the devil to come up out of the ground. There was just fire everywhere. All of a sudden, you hear this whooshing noise. There's going to be a fireball, and it's going to be him.
September 3rd, 1984, Norfolk, Virginia. A quiet Sunday morning is shattered when an urgent alarm sends Steve Lindblad and the men of Engine Company 1 to a massive gasoline tanker fire.
It was nothing like any of us had ever seen before. Everything was just fully engulfed in flames, orange-yellow flames going up 100, 150 feet or more up in the air.
The fire begins when a trash truck accidentally clips the corner of the tanker, which is filled with 8,400 gallons of gasoline. Seconds later, the tanker driver barely escapes injury when his cargo suddenly catches fire.
Gasoline is very volatile. It could have been the friction of the actual crash itself created the spark, which immediately ignited the vapors, and it just accelerated rapidly.
You could actually see rivers of gasoline going down the street into the storm drain, and trees were burning, cars there were burning. It looked like just waiting for the devil to come up out of the ground. There was just fire everywhere.
Even worse, the inferno erupts in a densely populated area.
We had the Ronald McDonald House with kids in it, and then there's a high-rise home for senior citizens. A lot of the people were invalids and couldn't get around very well. And if this tanker truck, another cell in it blew up, that could be an issue. So, I mean, all these things are going through everybody's mind trying to figure out, okay, what do we do?
And the tanker's internal structure makes this blaze especially difficult to fight. The fully loaded MC-306 tanker weighs close to 70,000 pounds and is configured with multiple internal compartments, or cells. Each cell can carry a different grade of gasoline or even diesel fuel. If the explosion and fire ruptured the cell walls, it could fuel this blaze for hours.
It looked like the flames were just getting higher and higher. He was just so intensive, you could feel it on the other side of the road.
As people are evacuated from nearby buildings, a call goes out for trucks equipped with firefighting foam. But for now, the crews on the scene have to use their only available resource: multiple streams of water.
All you can do is cool it down. But if you don't get to them in time, the aluminum of the tanker will melt. And once that starts melting, it starts exposing more cells, which gives you more fuel from the gasoline, and it's just a domino effect. More cells melt, more gas, more heat, more flame, more hell coming out of the ground.
But the use of water creates another problem.
Gasoline has a specific gravity of 0.73, so it'll actually float on water. And this enables it to travel on top of water and still burn. It'll ignite anything in its path. It's just like a running brush fire, but now it's on the water.
When the burning liquid encounters vertical shafts to the street, it explodes upward, catapulting manhole covers into the air.
just thought, this is crazy. Some people aren't going home, and I could be one of them.
But the arrival of trucks equipped with firefighting foam finally gives fire crews the tool they need to bring the blaze under control.
To extinguish a tanker fire, you've got to get foam on all of the fuel that's involved.
When mixed with water, firefighting foams create an impermeable barrier on top of gasoline and other hydrocarbons. The foam's fluorosurfactant molecules act like a soapy film that blankets the flaming gasoline, cutting off the oxygen it needs to burn.
We were able to get the truck cooled down to where the flames actually went out. A couple of the cells on the truck did not melt, and the gas was still in there, but it was hot.
Engine driver Dave DeLozer takes on the critical task of covering the fuel in those cells with foam.
Dave got up and couldn't open one of the safety valves on top of the first cell. It was so slippery with the foam. But the other one he could. So he took the nozzle with the foam and stuck it down in there, and the foam was getting in there and cooling things off. And all of a sudden, you hear this whooshing noise, and I'm looking, and this orange flame just comes blowing out of the hole. And I'm looking at it and thinking, oh, great, this thing's going to blow. It's going to blow up.
Firefighters in Norfolk, Virginia have their hands full when a tanker truck full of gasoline explodes in a densely populated neighborhood. As the situation seemingly begins to come under control, fireman Dave DeLozer encounters a potentially deadly problem while spraying foam on the flaming fuel.
And I'm looking at it and thinking, oh, great, this thing's going to blow. Then all of a sudden, that other safety valve popped off and all this fire came up underneath of it. And it's just going up underneath his coat. I just knew he was burning. Well, when that happened, he obviously jumped and moved and was so slippery he fell. He went into an open cell that was full of hot gas.
As Dave lands in hundreds of gallons of hot gasoline, he breaks open the foam blanket that's supposed to keep the ruptured tank from reigniting.
First thing that popped in my mind, it was going to reignite. There's going to be a fireball, and it's going to be him.
In one motion, Steve Lindblad pulls DeLozer out of the scalding liquid, but the gas-soaked engine driver is still in serious danger.
DeLozer was exposed to probably 200-degree liquid product in that tank. You can only be exposed to that for just seconds before serious injuries occur.
And once we got him out of there, that's when I realized, oh man, he didn't have his bunker pants on.
Without the protective bunker pants, not only is Dave's lower body exposed, but his open boot tops instantly fill with hot gasoline.
We were able to tackle him, get him down, and start getting his boots off of him, and they were full of gas. And I just knew he had to have some pretty severe burns on his legs. And
incredibly, Dave escapes the entire series of deadly events with just first-degree burns, the equivalent of a bad sunburn.
I could have died real quick, real easy, I mean, and I don't think that would have been a good death either.
As engine operator, Dave makes sure his crew has the water and power to fight the blaze. But with men and resources spread thin, Dave volunteers to take the foam line.
It was kind of a quick reaction, and I had my boots on, but I didn't have a chance to put my bunker pants on. My main concern was to go ahead and try to get this thing knocked down as quick as I could. I got up to a couple of compartments that had exploded, and I put a layer of foam on those, and I extinguished those. There was one compartment left that hadn't exploded yet, and I got thinking if I get up and put a layer of foam down on top of the gasoline, and I could smother it out.
After struggling with the safety valve, Dave opts to use the fill hole for access to the compartment.
I got the nozzle down in there, and I opened it up, and then I started hearing it churning and getting louder and louder, and I could feel the vibration on my feet. And I said, this thing is getting ready to blow. I was really in a bad spot, and I need to get off here as quick as I can. That's when the flames leaked all around me.
As Dave jumps, he aims for the ledge of the ruptured tank, but instead slips right into the hot gasoline.
Filled up my boots, filled up my fire coat, and it was very hot. Well, there's like somebody may have thrown boiling hot water on you. I thought for a minute, I said, I'm going to die right here. When Steve pulled me out, I was still burning. I felt like I might be on fire. It was that hot. Thank God that didn't ignite. If that had ignited, there would have been anything they could have done for me.
Thanks to the quick work of his fellow firefighters, Dave escapes the unthinkable.
It was scary. I didn't sleep good for a good while after that. I would have nightmares about it. I would think how close I came. I'll never forget that day as long as I live.
But for Steve, there's something else worth remembering.
Everybody went home. And when you go home from something like that, it's a good day.
This is one of the largest fires Norfolk has ever seen. Probably 60 or more firefighters fought this fire. Firefighters battled the flames for hours and tirelessly, and just did everything they could to stop it, and they did stop it.
If I had it to do differently, honestly and truly, I would have probably told these guys to hold on a minute, let me go get someone else with proper gear on, or somebody else, that's their job. And I'm sure they would have gotten somebody right on it. But at the time, I was thinking I was the only one there. I said, well, let me help. Let me do something. And if someone comes over and relieves me, then that'll be fine. If they don't, that'll be fine too. We're all working together.
I think firefighter Delosia was lucky in a couple of ways. One, he didn't swallow or inhale any of the fuel, which could have easily happened. And two, he had fellow firefighters close by that could pull him and render aid to his burns.
I remember thinking, holy smokes, what's going to happen here? How are they going to get him?
Once he loses his grip, he's lost to the forces of the channel.
And I remember thinking as he fell in that he's gone.
January 9th, 2005, in the Los Angeles suburb of Cerritos. Heavy rains are swelling flood channels that drain the Los Angeles basin and turning them into deadly torrents.
2005 was the second wettest season on record. And in a dry, arid climate like we have here in Los Angeles, storm flows can rise very quickly. In a matter of minutes, you can have the water go from 0 to 5-6 feet breezy.
This period of unusually heavy rainfall puts the Los Angeles County flood control system to the ultimate test. Its 500 miles of concrete-lined channels snake through the LA basin and are designed to route up to 25 billion gallons of water a day out of the city and into the Pacific Ocean. On this rainy Sunday afternoon, freelance videographer Rich Cowgill hears a police radio call about a man trapped in high water.
The roads were very, very slick. Heavy rain was falling, so I had to be careful not to become my own accident, but still get over there as quickly as possible.
By the time he reaches the location, Coyote Creek has turned into a raging river.
I saw this figure on top of what turned out to be a vehicle, and at the same time I'm hearing all of the rescuers making preparations, and I'm starting to realize that whatever is going to happen is going to happen right here.
He's in the center! In the center! All of the center of the
The channel can move this huge volume of water thanks to two important design factors. First, its smooth concrete lining allows water to move more freely. Second, the high sloped walls concentrate the flow into a narrow space, which greatly increases its speed.
The water was going extremely fast, faster than anything I'd ever seen before, and there was more water in that wash than I'd ever seen before.
In a creek like Coyote Creek, the water can flow as fast as 20 miles per hour. which is pretty much impossible for someone to swim against.
Rich's camera captures the rescuers' frantic preparations for a last stand.
We need that guy right there.
Okay, no, he's coming fast. He's coming faster. He's coming faster.
If they didn't get the victim here, there was a good chance that south of us, the water became very rough and they felt the car might overturn and the man might lose his placement on the vehicle.
The car is coming so fast, there is no time to lower a rescuer over the side. It's up to the victim to grab at least one of the safety lines before his car is washed out from under him.
I remember thinking that if this man somehow became separated from the car before they had the ropes on him, that he'd definitely be lost. When he disappeared and went underneath, everyone that was on the upstream side ran to the downstream side. And we saw the car come out, but the man never came out from the other side of the bridge. So everyone just sort of stood there and said, well, where is he? When he was out of sight for that additional 15 seconds, I still had the hope that he was underneath the bridge. When the man didn't come through onto the other side, on the downstream side, I remember thinking, he's got to be stuck. I just felt like maybe he was stuck under a pillar. He appeared for a brief moment, and I could actually see him holding onto the rope. And at that time, I was able to tell that his trousers had been ripped off by the current, and they were basically hanging off of one of his ankles. At that point, I really didn't know what the plan was going to be. I remember thinking, holy smokes, what's going to happen here? How are they going to get him?
Amazingly, the victim is still hanging on to the rope. But can he hold on long enough for the rescuers to pull him to safety?
There was nothing else securing him to that rope other than his wet hands. I remember thinking that if he slipped and fell, the chances of him surviving were very slim. At that point, I began to get a little bit frightened. His hands and his shoulder sort of get stuck under the bridge, but at the same time, the rescuers can't see that.
And the victim can't see what the rescuers are about to do.
Come on now, come on now, come on! Hold on!
It was devastating. I felt like, well, I've just seen someone get killed. The current was just too strong. Now it was going to be a search for a body recovery.
Heavy rains have swollen Los Angeles' flood control channels to near capacity. A man trapped on top of his car floats toward what may be his last chance to be rescued. Ropes are lowered to him, and just when he appears to be out of harm's way, the unthinkable happens.
And I remember thinking as he fell in that, he's gone. I didn't know if he'd hit his head. I didn't know how deep the water was, but I knew that he fell in at a kind of an awkward angle. And it looked like that he went in head first. It was devastating. I felt like, well, I'd probably just seen someone get killed. Now it was going to be a search for a body recovery. Within 1 or 2 seconds of having those thoughts, lo and behold, there he was, drifting down very quickly and drifting right into a series of ropes that they'd already laid out ahead of time. And he was basically holding there, fighting against the current, holding this rope. At that time, I remember zooming in on him, and it looked like he was body surfing. The current was just too strong. You can't hold on against something like that for very long. There's no way.
He's easily probably having to overcome a force of 400 or 500 pounds. And you also consider the fact that he's cold, he's in the water, he's probably in a weak condition. So it's a very difficult thing what he's being asked to do by the firefighters, have to hang onto that rope.
But neither the victim nor the rescuers are willing to give up.
Everyone was basically holding their breath. As soon as they lifted him over the side and he had both feet, both legs on dry land, everyone just sort of started yelling,
"Yeah! Yeah! Right on!"
Pretty euphoric feeling for everybody up there.
No one is happier with the outcome than William McCree, an ophthalmologist from Avila Beach, California.
I feel very fortunate to have come through in one piece and with my life.
His terror-filled experience begins a mile north of here when his car suddenly starts to hydroplane across Interstate 5.
The car veered left into the center divider, then hit that and started spinning and spun around.
Hydroplaning can happen when a vehicle's tires lose contact with a wet road surface. Tire tread patterns are designed to move water away from the tire. But if there's too much water, or if the tread is moderately worn down, enough water can build up on the leading edge of the tire to actually make it lose contact with the road.
From a witness who saw it, I went back in first through the guardrail and then down probably 20, 30 feet into the water. There really wasn't any way for me to just on my own get to the edge or get to safety. You could feel the force of the current pushing it and rocking it, so you feel like it was rocking, and it was gradually starting to shift more towards the center of the channel.
He drifts for almost a mile before he reaches the Artesia Avenue Bridge, where rescuers are waiting for him.
It looked pretty daunting being down there in the water and safety or dry land being 30 feet up. As I was getting close to the top, I hit the overpass, and I think the force of that blow caused me to let go and fall back into the water. Just seeing how close my head came to the concrete, if I'd hit that full force and been knocked out, then I probably would have just been washed downstream.
Yeah, there you go. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on.
Finally, as I went under the overpass, there were some ropes that the fire department had put down. Seeing one, I grabbed it. The current was so strong, but I just knew I had to hold on to it.
John, put that other vest behind him. Pull him behind him. Got it. Watch your feet.
Actually, the one thing that was going through my mind at the time was that I'm going to be on national TV. Someone's probably filming this, and don't have any pants on.
When you consider all of those things, you consider that he basically fell head first about 20 feet straight down into maybe a 4 or 5 foot raging river. I think he's extremely lucky.
For Bill, the most terrifying aspect of this experience is how quickly he lost control of his car in the rain.
Hydroplaning can happen just at a moment's notice, and there's no warning. And once it happens, you don't know where you're going to end up.